The following is rated S for spoilers.
Am I dead?
No. You've been healing so quickly. And no organs were hit, and your bleeding was really mild.
What this is?
This is a room in our house.
Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Hangover. My name is Alex, and today we will be discussing Beau is Afraid, the newest A24 film from writer-director Ari Aster, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Patti LuPone, Amy Ryan, and Nathan Lane, among a vast variety of others, releasing April 21st of 2023 with an estimated budget of $35 million, the biggest budget given to any A24 film. Has an estimated opening weekend of $2.7 million domestically. Now, this seems like a really low number, but that's only on 2,000 screens, which translates to about a $1,000 per screen average. That's insane. $3.3 million worldwide gross. This is an intense film, and I have the pleasure of talking about it here by myself, which is going to be a bit of a challenge, but we're going to do it. We're gonna. I have so many thoughts on this movie, which is ironic because coming out of it, your brain is just kind of goop. At the end of the movie, not a single person stood up until the first round of credits ended. Everyone sat silently in their seats for at least 5 minutes, because that's how do you even process what you just watched? Just the vastness and the insanity and just all of the things are in this movie. And it definitely just, it breaks your brain for a little bit. Especially considering the fact that it almost seems like you have two different movies going on here. The first half of it, I was on board all the way. I was in love with the idea, this concept that this guy is just terrified of everything. It made for some really funny moments at the beginning in the first segment in what seemed to be New York City, or just a city in general. Reminded me a lot of GTA, kind of like what an NPC's life in GTA would be like, but from the horror perspective, as opposed to where you have like Free Guy, which is a very comedic perspective on that same idea. But that's what my mind kept going to, is, wow, this seems like a more realistic version of GTA. But yeah, it was a super interesting idea, and you have this creepy family, and you have all this intrigue. But then the second half, it just gets really bizarre. The daughter kills herself by drinking paint, and then you have the crazy murder army dude is hunting him down, and he goes to a forest, and then we take a 20-minute break to talk about this other kind of story of like, wow, wouldn't it be great if this happened in my life? Told through crazy set pieces and designs. And then she goes back home to finally see his mother, and all of the chaos and bizarreness that ensues there. There's a lot going on in this movie. And as a whole, I think I really liked it. I saw a TikTok review where I think the guy kind of nailed it on the head. He said, this is a movie where coming out of it, your brain is kind of goop, and you feel like, yeah, you can recognize it's a good movie. You can appreciate a lot of the things going on there. He said, but it doesn't seem all that amazing, and it kind of just, it leaves you feeling a little dry. So can you give that a really good review? However, this is a movie where 5, 10, 20 years down the line, it may come back up, and you realize that this is a masterpiece, and you kind of put all the pieces together, because there are so many pieces that don't seem to have any sort of connection at all. And the bizarre thing is that should be a bad thing, but I think that's exactly what Ari Aster was going for. And so it makes this movie really hard to review, because so many things that I would normally say this is bad, this is a negative about the movie, was actually completely intentional, and was like that to give the audience a certain feeling, and to give the audience a certain experience watching the film. So Ari Aster, you did a great job at just breaking me. I don't know how the rest of this podcast is going to go, because it's really hard. It's really hard to dive into. But let's talk about one thing that is pretty simple, and that's acting. Joaquin Phoenix he's typecast at this point, right? I mean, he has this type of role down. I can't imagine anyone else playing the role of Beau, and selling it so beautifully. And I think it also is really great that Joaquin Phoenix he is a little older, and so I feel like this would have been a really simple concept for like a kid to be playing the role of Beau or something, right? Or someone really young, like, just going out into the world. I feel like we've seen variations of that, obviously not to this extreme, but we've seen variations of that in other stories and mediums. And I thought it was really interesting that we're seeing this is a grown ass man who can't go across the street to the gas station and get a bottle of water without completely losing his mind and everything going wrong. And that was really intriguing. And the whole first section was so intriguing. I keep saying, but there was just so much going on, so it's hard to keep my thoughts focused and on task. But yeah, Joaquin Phoenix did a phenomenal job. And honestly, the cast as a whole did a really, really great job. Everyone just had short little bits. No one was in it for more than 30 minutes at a time, other than Joaquin Phoenix. And that also made it a little difficult. You have all these characters constantly being put in front of your face. And as soon as you start to kind of get a hold of who they are, what's going on, you move on to the next person. So this is a movie that's going to require a lot of rewatches, I think. But despite how complicated and just insane and bizarre this story is, one thing I do want to touch on quickly and right at the front here is, as a whole, the filmmaking is phenomenal. This movie looks incredible. It sounded incredible. Everything about it is just is incredible. It's great. I have no complaints about anything in terms of the overall filmmaking aspect of it. And the closest thing I can compare it to is when you watch something like Tenet, a movie that a lot of people hate because they do not understand what's happening. And that's fair. I think that was the first movie I ever watched where I had zero clue what was going on the entire time. But after 4 or 5 rewatches, now I feel like I have a pretty firm grasp on it. But through all of that, even when I first saw it, absolutely loved the film. And the reason why was because I could still recognize all the little aspects of the filmmaking process. Nolan is a master director. He's one of the greatest of all time. And so even though the story of Tenet makes zero sense at first, you can still appreciate how incredible the filmmaking process is and all of the things that go into it. The same thing with Beau is Afraid. There's a lot of stuff happening, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. But overall, the filmmaking was just phenomenal. 10 out of 10, superb. Ari Aster did a fantastic job putting this together. But I mentioned, people's kind of thoughts on people rate movies differently, right? Grandma talks about how he ranks a movie based on whether or not he would watch it again, and if he would watch it, would he pay for it again? For me, I just like to look at how well executed and how well all the different aspects of the filmmaking process came together to tell one cohesive story, which is why I think this film is pretty good. However, with my ranking, and I think just in general, everyone's ranking has to include the story. And having just a really bizarre and confusing story, honestly, the plot is so thin that it's hard to even tell that there is a plot at times. The critical reception becomes really, really interesting. So Rotten Tomatoes has a 70% critic score and a 73% audience score. IMDb has a 7.3 and Letterboxd has a 3.7 out of 10. So this is one of the very rare instances where every score that we list is honestly in the exact same realm of about 70%. And I find that interesting because 70 isn't particularly super, super high. I feel like, especially with a Rotten Tomatoes score, 70% is kind of where you would rank movies that aren't bad, but they aren't great. Not a film that you're going to go back and watch over and over and over again. 70% is, it was a good, perfectly fine film, but nothing special. And so the fact that everyone kind of agrees on that, But also, this isn't one of those movies that is just it whatever. This is a movie that I feel like you either hate or I don't know if you can love this movie yet because it is so new. But I feel like it's a movie that you can either hate or you can be very, very intrigued by and maybe also love. But I don't know how people can do that. I saw another quick review someone left where they said this is one of the few movies where you can say the story was so convoluted and I don't know what's going on, and that would be a negative review. But then a positive review would be this movie is so convoluted and I have no idea what's going on. The exact same review, but two totally different perspectives on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think Ari Aster did that on purpose, obviously, and I have to give him credit for that. He completely divided so many people on what this movie is about and how well executed this movie was. Yeah, this is a really interesting film, to talk about, but also it's one of those movies that I can't recommend to anyone, but also I feel like everyone needs to see, at least in terms, everyone who's interested in film and like watching different things than what we're used to, which we'll talk about a little bit next segment. But yeah, it's such a bizarre film. I keep going back to it, but it really is. Let's talk about some of the ideas and the interpretations behind what this movie is, though, because as I've said several times, this movie's really bizarre, and it's hard to understand. And I think I know what I think the movie is about. I didn't think about this until like days. I didn't fully, put this together until days after I saw the film, just because I needed to hear other people's opinions and what maybe I didn't really read any interpretations, but other people's reviews and things that they spotted. Particularly my girlfriend, talking with her, she noticed quite a few things I did not, and that kind of helped me put these thoughts together. But I feel like Beau is Afraid is a journey of Beau going through the afterlife. I feel like Beau might be dead, at least after he gets hit by the truck. Because when he's walking over across the street, you see that the truck he's hit by is a food truck, and the family that takes him in immediately after this are serving food to people, but that's never brought up ever again. And so I feel like he may be either in a dream that starts even before that, whenever he's getting the messages. I feel like it's all a dream, or maybe he's dead, something along those sorts. And this is a journey of him trying to reconcile the fact that he doesn't fully love his mother. And that's getting to that point is just so bizarre, because I feel like this could have been a really, really quick movie to display that point. But I feel like he's going through all these things and he's trying to tackle all of these fears on his way to death. And I say that solely because of the ending and that final shot of him in the boat coffin thing. Yeah. So that's why I think he's dead, but also I feel like it's very possible he's dreaming. And it's all just kind of in his head, because his mom does say that he did instill this intense fear into him. So all the things at the beginning, I feel like could genuinely just be that's how he perceives how things are happening, and to us it's comical, but to him that's real life, and I think that's really interesting. There's a few other like small details that kind of put this idea together. Specifically towards the end, when he's in his mother's house and he is looking at the timeline of her career, one of the things on there is his apartment building, but it says that she founded this mental institution. And so we didn't have to ask ourselves, was he institutionalized? Like, he thinks, and we as the audience viewing the story through his perspective think that this is just his apartment, but is he actually institutionalized? And so through that, did he somehow escape the institution? Does he have just access to go in and out? Is this all a dream? Is he dead? What's going on here? It's hard to tell. But that's the thing that I think that I don't know how to feel about when it comes specifically to the story, is I feel like the main details and the biggest things that make the biggest impact on what is really going on are all Easter eggs in the background, like that timeline, like just quick little hints and things like that. It all seems to be, never seems to be the main focus. It's always there in the background, and if you find it, fantastic. You understand a little bit more. And I don't know. I feel like that's how it should be. But with Beau is Afraid, you find it, and then all of a sudden you understand everything. And again, I'm conflicted on how to think about this, because on the one end, it makes the story super confusing and bizarre and hard to follow. But on the other end, I think that was the point. Ari Aster is trying to make us, the audience, feel the same way that Beau does. And to do that, he has to take away the common sense aspects of what's going on. And he has to put us into the mindset of Beau, where we don't know what's going on. Yeah, if we had this one little piece of information, all of this could make a whole lot more sense. But instead, he's taking that away, so we can't use common sense. We have to think like an institutionalized person like Beau, and take out all logic and just go along on this journey. That is so brilliant. It makes watching it very, very difficult. And it makes, this is a movie that needs to be rewatched, but it makes, with it being 3 hours, with it being confusing, it's difficult to want to rewatch the film. But it's brilliant. It puts us into the headspace, and mindset of Beau, which is so brilliant. It's one of the things I love about film is, we can't just be told what's going on and what's going through the character's head. If a director or a writer or whatever wants us to feel in the headspace of a particular character, they have to find a way to convey that to the audience without explicitly saying it. And Ari Aster mastered this craft of giving the audience a little bit of anxiety and showing us what it is like, to be irrationally afraid of literally everything. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I think that that provides a lot of opportunities. And I feel like this can be a jumping point for more stories like that, and can be a really great example of how do you purposely alienate the audience to connect to a character who is completely alienated from everything. I feel like that was really, really brilliant. And so I have to give him credit on that end, but also I have to take away points because the story it hurts the story to do that. And so it's an interesting balance trying to figure out, what to do and what not to do. And I compared the Tenet earlier, and I literally just kind of put this thought together in my head right now. If we were to have done a podcast when Tenet came out, and things I was saying when it did come out, I was a very strong defender, still am, of that film. And I have constantly said, Christopher Nolan, this movie is, when he becomes, one of the greatest directors of all time, if he hasn't already, but when people write his book, and film students are studying Nolan in 50 years, Tenet, I feel like, is one of those landmark movies that is going to be talked about, because what Nolan did with that is he took his name and his built-in audience at this point, and he had an unlimited budget, really. Anything he wanted to get made was going to get made by somebody. And he experimented with the idea of, what if you don't have a main character? What if you don't have any characters, really? What if you just have characters that are one-dimensional and don't matter? The only thing that matters is this concept. How does that play out? And you can really explore the concept really, really well, but as a whole, the story falls incredibly flat, because the concept, even though what he had was a really, really great concept, you can't really pull it off without any sort of character, because without character, it's hard to have plot, and without plot, you don't have a story. And without a character who wants something, you don't really have a story. So having just he took the hit on all these film students who might try doing the same thing. And he did it first, and he showed us what to do and what not to do. And I feel like this is a really, really great follow-up to that exact same thing of Ari Aster saying, okay, like, well, what if we flip it, and what if the concept is about a character? What if we make it almost pretty much a character study? And what if there is no really discernible plot other than a very, very simple, it's Beau trying to go see his mother. What if we take all that out and we focus entirely on this concept of being irrationally afraid of everything? I feel like this is a really great follow-up to Tenet. And so assuming that mindset is kind of where Ari Aster was, and where he assuming he did use Tenet to somehow, help inspire and propel Beau is Afraid into the light. I am really excited and curious to see what other filmmakers can take Beau is Afraid and use that to propel and help their films. So yeah, overall, Beau is Afraid is really, really exciting, and I am constantly on the cusp of talking about what I want to talk about next segment. It's like I mentioned earlier, this is A24's largest budget they've ever given to a film, and let's be honest, it's not going to make, even though it's done pretty well in the box office, it's not going to make that money back. So I want to talk about next segment, how Ari Aster was given a blank check and how he made this movie. Was that a good decision on A24's part? Was that a horrendous decision on A24's part? What are the pros, what are the cons of this kind of concept, and should we have more of this kind of approach to filmmaking from studios? So if you're interested in any of that at all, I highly recommend you stay tuned. So you've probably already noticed that this episode is a lot shorter than our typical episodes, even the ones I do by myself. That's for one reason in particular, and that's because I'm an idiot, and I recorded the entire second half of the show, except I left my mic muted the entire time, so there's no audio for it. So I am going to re-record it probably pretty quickly, kind of get the general gist of things, because I said a lot of things. It was really inspiring. It's really upsetting you didn't see it. That's a joke, by the way, if you couldn't tell. So yeah, I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna try to do this a second time. So here's the thing: Ari Aster has an interesting history, and for those of you that don't know it, just a brief recap. Ari Aster's first feature film is called Hereditary. If we go back about a year ago, or not quite a year, but if you go back some ways, you will find our episode that we did on Nope. I did that with my good friend Andrew Sexton, who is a horror movie guru. He talked about Hereditary in that episode and how it's not just his favorite horror film, but his favorite film of all time. And I feel like that's the general consensus among the horror community, is that Hereditary is one of, if not the greatest horror films of all time. And so we follow that up with a movie called Midsummer, and that is another incredible film. I knew nothing about that movie except for what I had seen on like Instagram from those pages that just like post really great screenshots and frames of films, and just that movie is gorgeous and it's beautiful. And just I had seen all these reviews saying you should go listen to it, and you should go watch it. And I was like, okay, yeah, I definitely should. And I went into it thinking that it was like some Greta Gerwig feel good kind of movie. And then about 30 minutes in, people started sacrificing themselves to demons by jumping headfirst down a cliff. And I was horrified, to say the least. And I watched that movie by myself, and it was not a fun experience. A fun story, but not a fun experience. And so he's made two just incredibly successful movies. That's the Midsummer is a fantastic movie, even though it did leave me slightly emotionally scarred and mentally scarred from not knowing what the movie was about. But it's a great movie. Highly recommend it. Just don't go in completely blind, which if you're following this recommendation, I guess now it's not completely blind. So you should be good to watch it immediately after finishing this episode. But anyway, yeah, he's had these two massively successful films. So when he went to A24 with this idea, and I mean, I assume that he saved some time, went straight to A24, because I don't think any other studio would even think about making this movie. He went to A24, pitched the idea, and they said, great, here's a blank check. You can have more money than we've ever given to anyone before for a movie that, quite frankly, they had to have known was not going to work. It's just not possible unless it is 3 hours long and there's hardly any, major plot points and things like that. I mean, the plot is razor thin. So maybe there was a lot more in it that they thought, hey, maybe you'll keep that stuff, cut the random things like the seemingly random 20-minute interlude going through the journey of some dude played by Joaquin Phoenix on an adventure to find his family. Maybe they thought that was going to get cut and he was going to keep some of like the really subtle out of context things, but that's not what he did. Instead, he cut the out of context things and kept to the seemingly random things. And that's all just a massive assumption on my end. Maybe A24 read the script and everything in the script is in the final film, and they said, "Great, let's do it," because you're Ari Aster. Maybe that's what happened. I doubt it. But here's the thing: like, they had to have gone in knowing that this movie was not going to make its budget back. I mean, it did have a really, really great limited release, as I mentioned. I mean, $1,000 per screen average on 2,000 screens. That's really great. But that was in limited release. And so, yes, lots of people are going to go see that movie who want to see that movie. At least I really hope so. I can't imagine, just being like those people who, like, every Sunday we go to the movies and you decide, hey, this movie is playing at this time, let's go see it. And then you're going to have a similar experience to what I did with Midsummer, but worse because it's Beau is Afraid. And so I feel like the only people who are going to see this movie are fans of Ari Aster and horror fans and things like that, in which case I feel like they might be disappointed as opposed to really, really enjoying the film. There are those people out there for sure, but I feel like that's a pretty big split. And so the audience that's going to come back and actually watch this movie over and over again is very, very small. Even though this is one of the few movies that I think you absolutely have to watch several times to get hardly any grasp on what the story really is. And so I feel like they took a massive gamble. I don't think they're going to make that money back. And I think that they might be okay with it. And I know that I am pretty okay with it. Because one of the things we have to ask ourselves is, like, with this movie in particular, should there have been more studio oversight? Could A24 have said, okay, let's not do these weird things. Let's rework the script a little bit. And this could have been a much better movie, maybe kept a lot of the same themes and ideas and things that Ari Aster did really great, but maybe the studio could have fixed it up a little bit. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think the reason I'm pointing it out is I feel like we are constantly saying the complete opposite. If you go back just last week, this was not really planned at all in our schedule, but if you go back last week, the theme of the episode, the entire topic of the episode was how Disney ruined The Mandalorian. They, like A24 Beau is Afraid, they gave Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni complete creative freedom to do whatever they wanted to do with their little Star Wars show, because it was just going to go into Disney Plus. No one was going to watch it, whatever. And then The Mandalorian was great, and it blew up Disney Plus, and Disney said, okay, great, we need more shows. But Book of Boba Fett, wow, that really sucks. We're going to throw The Mandalorian in there because, yeah. So then season 3 kind of suffered because part of season 3 had to be put into another show. But then the other part of season 3 also had to be used to set up all the other shows that were happening. And it ruined The Mandalorian. Still overall a good show. Just to spoil that episode if you didn't see it, if you haven't, go watch the full thing. But it hurt The Mandalorian. Same thing. I didn't mention it last week, so I'll mention it here. But with Kenobi, that was a script that somebody wrote for a movie. That was a movie script, and they sent it to them, and Disney said, "This is a good idea. We're not going to do a Kenobi movie, but we're going to keep it on the back burner in case one day we decide we do want to make a Kenobi movie." And Disney Plus wanted to make a Kenobi show for Disney Plus, and so they pulled out that script and they split it into 6 episodes. And because of that, the show was extremely lackluster and extremely slowly paced. And just it was hurt a lot. It could have been so much better if the studio just didn't mess with it. And so it's interesting that here we're now asking, should there have been more studio oversight? The complete opposite of what I feel like we are constantly asking and what we are constantly saying. And I'm a little conflicted. I mean, yes, potentially it could have been better, but also I think it's good that we maintain that we start to develop, not maintain, but start to develop the precedent that studios just need to give creator, they can fund projects and things, but they need to allow filmmakers and creatives to do their thing. because while yes, this movie is incredibly flawed, flawed in the sense that it doesn't make a lot of sense. I say flawed because I don't like that I don't know what's going on. It's not that flawed, but there's just a lot going on, and it's hard to make any sense of what's happening. Could a studio have helped with that? Absolutely. But should they have? I don't know. Because if we can maintain this precedent of not letting studios just kind of giving blank checks and letting filmmakers do what they do best, make films, we can get some really cool things. So we've got so many really great concepts and things. This makes you feel anxious, and it really puts you into the headspace of Beau and where he is at in life in this interesting situation. There's this phrase going around that like Beau is Afraid is like Lord of the Rings for really anxious people. Because for any normal person, it seems pretty. This is all just it's funny. Even Ari Aster is calling this a horror like comedy. But in reality, this is kind of the life that some people are living. It's over dramatic and over exaggerated, but people have similar experiences to this. And so I think it's important that we get more movies like this, more bizarre films. That's why I'm really grateful for studios like A24 and Legion M, who, they make these small indie movies that do some really, really strange things. Like in this one, having penis monsters who are your father, apparently. Sorry if you haven't seen the movie. That probably sounds really bizarre, and well, it was really bizarre. That was really out of left field, but it's good that I think we have those things because they can try it. Is Darth Vader revealing that he's Luke's father work? Absolutely. Does a giant dick monster revealing that he's Beau's father work? Not really. And so we can scratch that one off the list. Let's not try that one again. And that's a really silly and over dramatic example, but I think it gets the point across. Is films like this, they're relatively low stakes. I mean, A24 is coming off of Everything Everywhere All at Once, is massive success. So I feel like Beau is Afraid is going to be a financial hit. Obviously, $35 million is a lot of money that anyone would absolutely love to have, but A24 is going to be fine after this one movie, I believe, ultimately fails, and they doesn't quite make all of its money back. But I feel like it's going to inspire a lot of other films. And so I really, really want more movies like this. Not necessarily the exact same thing, but more movies that are bizarre and weird that not a lot of people are going to see, but introduce a lot of interesting concepts and interesting ways of approaching filmmaking and telling interesting stories. I've always said that, to me, what makes art good art, and movies are art. So what makes good movies, what makes good art in general, is art that inspires other art. I think it's a bit extreme to say that Ari Aster looked at Nolan and copied off of him and used that to inspire Beau is Afraid. I don't think that's the case. I think it is just two coincidences where very similar situations were happening. But I would like to think that. I think this movie can, it's tackling mental illness in a way that we've never seen before. It's very normal, I think, for us to go see a movie about mental illness, and the main objective of the film is to develop empathy for the character by showing, how hard their life is and they don't have control and things like that. And that's great. We need stuff like that. I'm all for that. But what I am proposing is, what if we have more things like Beau is Afraid that actually put the audience into the mindset, or at least give them kind of an idea of, this seems ridiculous to an audience, but let's take out all of the things that a normal person would say, well, yeah, X, Y, and Z is here. Let's just take those out, because that's what it's like to be in Beau's head. Now, all of a sudden, you don't know what's going on. And now all of a sudden you can have empathy you are literally in the other person's shoes. And so you can have way more empathy, for that person and for people with those kinds of situations. And I think that is really, really cool. And I would love to see more stuff like this. And I feel like Ari Aster with this film is paving the way for more stuff like that. And that's really, really exciting to see more stuff where I can really connect and relate to a character on a level that we've never been able to relate to characters before. So I'm really, really excited to see what the future holds, where where Beau is Afraid is going to end up, like I said, I feel like in 20, 30 years, this could be seen as a masterpiece, and it could be held as, this tent pole of this started this new trend and this new wave of filmmaking, and the way that we tell films and the characters that we tell them about. Really, really excited for what the future may hold. Would I recommend this movie to just the normal person? Probably not. There are so many other things out there right now that just hold a lot more wide audience appeal. But if you are looking for something different, if you are like a film student or someone who's interested in creating stories, writing, whatever, I would highly recommend this, because I think that this is going to have a lot of value for you, just in terms of seeing how something can be done completely differently. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what kind of art might stem from Beau is Afraid. I want to leave with the the critic consensus review on Rotten Tomatoes. Maxwell Rabb wrote this, and in his review, he said, "Its paranoid realism mutates from its most enticing feature into its greatest shortcoming during its 3-hour runtime. That said, it's clear that Aster is experimenting with his artistic vision and is likely to produce excellence another time." Yeah, that is absolutely what I think. Great first half, really interesting first half. Goes off the deep end in the second half, my opinion at least. But this is really just A24 really allowed Ari Aster to express his artistic vision completely. And did it work this time around? No. I'll just be blunt about it. No, it did not work very well this time around. However, next time it can work great, whether that is Ari Aster or that is somebody else. And I'm excited to see what that may be. You've been listening to the Popcorn Hangover. My name is Alex, and we have been discussing Beau is Afraid, the newest film A24, and writer director Ari Aster. Next week, we are going to be talking about a movie. Well, let's put it this way. This week is a movie that is crazy and is extremely unique. You've never seen it before, and you may not want to ever see this kind of movie again. Next week, you pretty much have seen this movie before about 30, 40 times. We already know how it's going to end and all of that. Not a whole lot of surprises there. And if you know the show, you know exactly what we're talking about next week. So if you figure it out, let us know on all of the things. Also, let us know what your thoughts were on Beau is Afraid on all the things. Instagram, patreon.com/Popcorn Hangover, and TikTok. That is all I've got for you. So we will talk to you next time.